My name is Nora Callahan, and I'm 33 years old. On my second day of being a mother, I stood on the sidewalk outside my in-laws' stone gate, holding my day-old daughter next to two suitcases somebody else had packed for me. And behind that oak front door, my mother-in-law had just informed me there was no room in that house for a useless wife. My husband watched from an upstairs window. He didn't open it. I want to tell you I did something dramatic. I didn't. I stood there in the June heat with a newborn against my chest, doing what I do for a living, which is math. And then a silver sedan pulled up to the curb, and my mother stepped out of it with a lawyer and a folder. And what was inside that folder hit my in-laws' famous family like weather. Nobody saw it coming, least of all me. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women keep the receipts and the endings get earned, not gifted. If stories about family, betrayal, and boundaries are your kind of stories, you're home. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. Let me rewind properly. I grew up in half of a duplex on Larkspur Street with my mother, Renata Callahan, who spent 3 decades as an escrow officer at the downtown title company. My father left when I was 4. What's left of him in my memory is a denim jacket and the scent of spearmint gum, and honestly, even the jacket might just be something I remember from a photo. My mother never badmouthed him and never ran after him either, and that tells you nearly everything you need to know about Renata. She was never the warm blanket type of mother. She was more like snow tires bought in October, practical love, routine upkeep, no speeches. Her whole career was spent reading the fine print other people were too thrilled to bother with. Young couples on their first house, farmers refinancing land, wealthy families quietly mortgaging vacation homes. Her one rule, repeated all through my childhood like a pledge of allegiance, was, read it before you sign it. And if they won't let you read it, that's your answer. We were never poor, exactly. We were careful. Coupons, second-hand shops, 1 trip a year to a lake, 2 hours off. And I have to be honest about what that carefulness did to me growing up. It made me hungry. Not for money, for something else. The thing I used to see glowing through windows on my walk home from school. Whole families together, grandparents at the table, a father carving the roast, a name everyone at church already recognized, a house you belonged to instead of half a house you rented. My mother gave us solid footing, and I spent my whole childhood staring over the fence at castles. It took me 33 years, 2 suitcases, and 1 silver sedan to finally figure out which of those 2 things actually survives a storm. Every town like Cedar Hollow has a family like the Merricks, the stone gate posts on Ashford Lane, the name over the furniture store downtown, engraved on a plaque at the library, listed on the founder's wall at the country club. Merrick, 3 generations photographed by the same fireplace every Christmas for the local paper. The kind of photo where even the family retriever looks like it inherited something. Vivian Merrick chaired the Heritage Committee. Douglas Merrick waved from a convertible during the 4th of July parade. Whenever people in Cedar Hollow said that name, their voices dipped slightly in the middle, like a small bow. I was 13 when I asked my mother, over meatloaf in our half of the duplex, why our family couldn't be like the Merricks. She didn't look up from her plate. "We don't buy names, honey," she said. "We buy ground." I rolled my eyes, the way 13-year-olds are contractually obligated to. But here's what I couldn't see back then. There was no envy at all in her voice. None. Instead, there was something dry, something knowing, the same tone she used at work when a customer bragged about a deal she'd already read every page of. It was the voice of a woman who'd spent 30 years at an escrow desk in a small town, watching every prominent family's paperwork cross her counter, one signature at a time. My mother knew things about the castles of Cedar Hollow the way a plumber knows things about a beautiful house from the inside. I never thought to ask what. For almost 20 more years, I wouldn't. By the time I finally did, I was standing on a sidewalk, holding everything I owned. I met Daniel Merrick because of a spreadsheet. I do bookkeeping for small businesses, have since I was 24, self-employed, my name on the door of a one-room office, Callahan Bookkeeping. Merrick Home Furnishings brought me in to untangle their inventory accounts, and the manager assigned to work with me was the owner's son, 32, sleeves rolled up, self-deprecating in a way nobody with that last name really had to be. Daniel was, and this matters later, genuinely likable. By our second morning, he already knew how I took my coffee. He did gentle, funny impressions of the sales staff. When the numbers embarrassed the store, he never blamed the last bookkeeper. He'd just laugh and say, "We're 100-year-old family business, Nora. That's 100 years to build bad habits." I liked him in a way that crept up on me slowly, the way a slow leak eventually floods a basement. 8 months in, he brought me to Ashford Lane to meet his parents. Vivian Merrick received me in a living room that smelled like lemon oil and old money, looking at me the way an appraiser eyes a chair. Somebody's calling an antique, a slow scan, joint by joint, checking for glue. Her first question wasn't about what I did or how we'd met. She tilted her head, smiled with just the front of her face, and asked, "Callahan, now whose people are the Callahans?" I told her my mother worked at the title company and that my mother was pretty much my whole family. Something flickered behind Vivian's eyes and got quietly filed away. I read it as disappointment at the time. It took me years to wonder if it was really arithmetic. We married the spring I turned 30, at the club, under a tent Vivian picked, surrounded by flowers. Vivian approved, in front of 200 guests, of whom I could maybe name 40. I'd wanted something small by the lake. I lost that argument so early, I'm not sure it was ever really a negotiation. The town expects certain things of this family, Vivian told me, patting my hand like a gavel. The one fight I actually won, I won quietly at the county clerk's office. I kept my own name, Nora Callahan. When Vivian found out, the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Merrick brides take the name," she said. "It's an honor other women have been grateful for." My mother, standing nearby in her one good dress, said nothing, but her eyebrow delivered a full sentence on its own. Daniel did what I'd spend the next several years watching him do. Stepped into the middle, hands raised, charming and apologetic in both directions at once. "Mom, it's her name, Nora. Mom means well. A line for each of us." Nobody defended. Everybody was managed. I filed it under wedding stress. One more thing happened that weekend that I noticed and then forgot. At the reception, I overheard the club's events manager murmuring to Douglas near the bar, something about the balance, the card, maybe the other account, Mr. Merrick. Douglas's parade wave smile faltered for exactly 1 second before he laughed and clapped the man on the shoulder like old teammates. Rich people's paperwork, I told myself, the plumbing behind the castle walls. Across the room, my mother was watching the same exchange over the rim of her glass, and she didn't look surprised at all. The plan was to live on Ashford Lane for a year, maybe 2, save up, then get our own place. "The East Wing has its own bath," Daniel said. "It's practically an apartment." You can already hear the word I should have questioned, practically. We moved in with my office plants and his record collection, and for 2 weeks it really was a soft landing. Big kitchen, garden, Sunday dinners with cloth, napkins. Then on a Tuesday, Vivian knocked on our door holding a leather book, and I got introduced to the household ledger. "Every couple under this roof contributes," she explained warmly. the way you'd explain gravity. Our share came to $850 a month toward the household, duly recorded in her ledger with everyone's initials, in a column, like a rooming house from 1910. And then, almost as an afterthought, the second ask, delivered as a compliment. Daniel tells me you're a wizard with books. The family's accounts are a beginning. Shambles, dear. It would mean so much. Meaning I would also be doing the Merrick family bookkeeping for free. I want to be honest about what I felt, because this is the part of the story where I stopped being able to blame anyone but the ledger inside me. I felt chosen, useful. The girl from the duplex handed the keys to the castle's books. I said yes before Daniel even looked up from his phone. $850 a month for the privilege of doing free accounting for people whose gate had a name on it. My mother would have read that contract twice and slid it back across the counter. I signed it with a smile. In my defense, nobody handed me anything to read. That turned out to be the whole design. Here's what you learn when a 100-year-old name hands you its checkbook. Names don't cash. I had the Merrick household accounts balanced inside a month, and what they balanced to was a slow, elegant leak. The furniture store's transfers to the family had thinned every year for a decade. The club does, the Heritage Committee galas, the landscaping service with the embroidered shirts, the wine deliveries. None of it had thinned at all. The house consumed like it was still 1985. The income arrived like a store with two big box competitors out by the highway. I did what I do for every client, bleeding quietly. I built a gentle little proposal, trimmed the landscaping to twice a month, rebid the insurance, pause one of the club memberships. Douglas hadn't touched the golf course in 2 years. I presented it after Sunday dinner in the soft voice I use on proud old shop owners. Vivian listened the way a queen listens to whether she has no intention of experiencing. Then she folded her hands and delivered the house motto with a smile that ended the meeting. This family does not live like accountants, dear. Fine. But one line in those books wouldn't leave me alone. Every month, $960 went out to something called Bedrock Servicing, LLC. Autopay, memo line blank, going back years. No file, no folder, no explanation anywhere in the drawer of documents Vivian had surrendered to me. It wasn't insurance. It wasn't the store. When I asked Vivian, she said, Douglas handles that, in the same tone as the motto. When I asked Douglas, he turned up the volume on a golf tournament and asked if I'd ever seen anything like this young man's short game. I let it go. Write that down somewhere. I let it go. At the back of the Merrick property, past the garden, there's a 2-story carriage house, brick, slate, roof, gorgeous bones, abandoned to boxes and mice since sometime around the moon landing. The first time I walked through it, I did what I now recognize as a dangerous thing for a hungry heart to do in a beautiful ruin. I furnished it in my head, and Vivian, who missed nothing, watched me do it. That fall, over dessert, she made the offer, with Daniel nodding beside her like a notary. Fix it up, you two. That's your place. Every young Merrick couple needs a nest, and heaven knows we're not using it. A 2-bedroom home on the family land, hours from anywhere else I'd have chosen, and still, the girl from the duplex actually teared up at the table, which I'm sure was noted in a ledger somewhere, but I am still my mother's daughter. So the next morning, I asked as lightly as I could whether we might put something in writing. Nothing dramatic, just a page, a lease, a life estate, anything with ink on it. Vivian looked at me with gentle, wounded amusement, the expression you'd give a child who asked you to sign for a hug. Family doesn't do paperwork, dear, I asked Daniel privately to press. He kissed my forehead and said the 11 words I'd be hearing in my sleep for years. It's my parents, Nora. I promise you, you can trust me. So here's what I did, and thank God for the habit. I said okay. I opened my savings, $41,000. Every dollar of it earned one small business ledger at a time. And I hired the contractor myself. And I kept every receipt, every invoice, every transfer, every check in a green folder in my office. You'll see why that matters. The renovation took most of a year, and I loved it the way you love a thing you're secretly building your damn whole future inside. I chose the doorknobs, real brass, warm in the hand. I stood in the gutted kitchen with the contractor, a patient bear of a man named Warren, arguing happily about where a bando should go. Daniel came out on weekends, swung a hammer for an hour, and got photographed doing it. I came out every day I could and got sawdust in my hair. At Sunday dinners, Vivian began mentioning me almost fondly, which should have been my warning because her fondness always arrived with a moral attached. One night, passing the potatoes, she surveyed the table and delivered it. You know what I appreciate about Nora? She contributes. Everyone under this roof earns their keep. Heads nodded around the china like it was scripture. Douglas said, Here, here. Daniel winked at me. That's Mom for you, and speared a green bean, and I sat there feeling, God help me, proud. Earning my keep as if that sentence were a compliment in Tem and not a price tag, as if anyone had ever asked what Daniel's keep cost, or Douglas's, or the retrievers. That's the thing about a house with a ledger instead of a heart. The rules only have gravity for some people, and you can live there a long time before you notice which way things fall. That Christmas, the 3-generation photo in front of the fireplace happened as always. Vivian seated, center, Douglas's hand on her shoulder, Daniel behind. I took the picture. I remember thinking, next year I'll be in it. Hold that thought. It expires in about 8 months. By late winter, the carriage house had drywall, plumbing, and my whole heart. Warren was down to trim work and paint. Daniel and I stood in the empty upstairs bedroom one Saturday, light coming through the new window I'd fought for, and he put his chin on my head and said, Crib goes there, and pointed to the corner. I cried a little into his coat, because 2 days earlier, in the bathroom of our dumb East Wing, practically an apartment, I had watched 2 pink lines appear on a test. We told the family at Sunday dinner. I will now describe Vivian Merrick receiving the news of her first grandchild, because it happened in 2 distinct movements, like a short symphony. Movement 1, genuine delight. She clapped her hands once, actually glowed, said, a Merrick baby. For 4 full sets, I saw the woman Daniel swore existed under the committee chair. Movement 2, arriving cameos before the pie was cut. Recalibration. Now, she said, folding her napkin, how are you planning to manage your little business? Clients can be so demanding and you'll be needed at home. We should think about what your months look like, not how are you feeling, not have you told your mother. What do your months look like? Which, translated from fluent Vivian, means, what does your cash flow look like? I said work was flexible, that bookkeeping travels well, that I'd managed harder things than a baby. She smiled and said, of course, dear, and wrote nothing down, because the ledger in her nap head never needed paper. I didn't know it yet, but somewhere in that pause between the clap and the tound nappen, my file in that house had moved from asset to liability, pending review. At 24 weeks, I started bleeding on a Tuesday morning and spent the night in a hospital bed listening to my daughter's heartbeat gallop on a monitor, which resets your entire definition of what matters. The diagnosis had a Latin name. The prescription was plain English, bed rest, modified, until delivery. No commuting to clients, no lifting. Stress, the doctor said, looking at me the way doctors look when they brained, mean it. Not optional to avoid. Medical. Daniel held my hand and said all the right things in the room. My mother drove down before dawn and said almost nothing, which from Renata is devotion, and left a cooler of food in my refrigerator labeled by day of the week. My income dropped through the floor. I kept 4 clients I could serve from a 10 laptop in bed. I lost 9. The first of the month came, and for the first time in 3 years, I could put $500 into the household envelope instead of $850. I wrote a note explaining, promised to catch up, and slid it under Vivian's ledger like a schoolgirl leaving an apology on a teacher's desk. Nothing was said. That's the part people don't understand about houses like that. Nothing is ever said. Instead, 2 mornings later, the ledger appeared on my breakfast tray, open to the contributions page, my initials at the top of a column, and next to the current month, in Vivian's fountain pen hand, a small, neat red circle. That was all. A red circle delivered with toast. Daniel said, "I'll cover it. Don't stress. Remember what the doctor said." And then his next paycheck from the family store came up short because, he said, rubbing his neck, "The store's a little tight right now. The store tight. File that next to Bedrock Servicing, $960 a month. Memo line blank. Here's how a house disappears. By degrees, politely, at dinner." 3rd trimester, I was allowed downstairs for meals, and I sat at that cherry wood table like a chair that talked. Conversation flowed around me, the committee, the club, the neighbors' addition. If I mentioned the nursery, the subject changed within 2 sentences. Vivian developed a repertoire of stories that all had the same moral delivered to the table at large while looking at no one, which meant me. When I was carrying Daniel, she'd say, ladling soup. I hosted 40 people for Douglas's parents' anniversary on my feet all hond evening. Women of this family have never been delicate. Douglas would nod at his soup, and Daniel, I want to be precise about Daniel, because he's not a villain. He's something that costs you more slowly. Daniel got quiet, not cold, quiet. He'd squeeze my knee under the table, a private telegram, sorry, you know how she is, and say nothing above the tablecloth. I learned that a pen squeeze under a table is what surrender feels like when it still loves you. So I did what my mother's daughter does when the world goes soft underfoot. I kept books, my own, now a plain notebook in my nightstand. Every household payment I'd ever made, dated, every BNU, carriage house invoice, cross-referenced to the green folder in my office. $41,000 in renovations, $35,000 in household contributions over 3 years. I wasn't planning anything. I want that understood. There was no strategy, only a bookkeeper laying sandbags out of habit. 1 page at a time, the way some women pray. Then one night, passing the study door on my slow lap of the hallway, I heard Vivian on the phone, her voice low and vicious in a way the committee never got to hear. "I understand the situation, but this household cannot carry a mouth that doesn't work." I stood in that hallway with my hand on my belly and made myself believe she was talking about the store. An employee, a vendor, anyone, you'd have done it too. At 8 months pregnant, on doctor-ordered calm, you ration what you're able to know. The carriage house was finished. Finished. Warren had walked me through on video call, brass knobs warm in the afternoon light, my window exactly where I'd fought for it. I proposed the obvious. We'd move in before the baby came, get settled, set up the crib, 10 steps from the main house but a door of our own, and the stalling began. So smooth it took me 2 weeks to recognize it as stalling. After the final inspection, dear. There was no inspection scheduled. I'd hired the contractor. The insurance needs sorting first. I offered to sort it. I was reminded rest was medical. After the baby comes, we'll see about everything. We'll see. Then one afternoon, I watched from the East Wing window as 2 men in polo shirts carried folding tables, gala banners, and 40 boxes of Heritage Committee archives across the garden and into my carriage house, my kitchen, my brass, my window, and stacked them where the crib was supposed to go. Vivian directed traffic with one finger, pointing which of my rooms would hold which of her boxes. When I asked at dinner, she didn't even reload. Storage, temporarily, it's not as if anyone's living there. And then she took the key. I want to slow down here because of everything that happened in that house. This is the moment my body still remembers first. I kept the carriage house key on my everyday ring, a heavy brass thing, old-fashioned, warm in the pocket like the doorknobs I'd chosen to match it. Warren had handed it to me at the walkthrough with a little ceremony, key to the castle boss, because he knew whose sweat and savings were in those walls. It lived between my office key and my car key. Some evenings, I'm not ashamed to say, I'd hold it in my coat pocket like a worry stone. It was the one object in the world that said promised. A week after the boxes went in, Vivian stopped me in the front hall, hand already out, palm up. The painters need access, dear, and we can't be hunting you down in your condition. Let me hold the carriage house key. I'll return it when everything's settled. Reader, the painting was done. I had paid the painter. I looked at her open palm and heard my mother's voice. If they won't let you read it, that's your answer. And I heard the doctor's voice. Stress is medical. I was 36 weeks pregnant, standing in a hallway that had gotten very quiet. I worked the brass key off the ring and set it in her hand. She closed her fingers and smiled. There. Isn't that simpler? She never returned it. I asked once, 2 weeks later, carefully casual. You're about to give birth, she said, not unkindly, which made it worse. What could you possibly need a key for? Every morning, after that, I looked at the gap on my keyring. Remember the gap, we're coming back for it. Ren was born in June, 2 days after my due date, 7 pounds even, with a cry like a fire alarm and my mother's stubborn chin. Labor was 14 hours, and for the record, the person in the room was Renata, in the good dress she wears to things that matter, reading a paperback between contractions like a woman guarding a border, which is exactly what she was doing. Daniel arrived at hour 11, apologizing, hair wild, an emergency meeting about the store, he said. The bank refinancing, he'd explain later. Even through the fog, I remember thinking, there's that word again, refinancing, the plumbing word. But then Ren was here, and the world narrowed to 7 pounds of it, and I forgave everything on general principle. They put her on my chest, and I understood in 1 second flat every unreasonable thing my mother had ever done. Vivian visited that evening, 10 minutes by the clock on the wall. She wore the good pearls, looked into the bassinet at her first grandchild, and said, "This is verbatim. I have replayed it enough to certify the transcript. A girl. Just that, in the tone you'd use, finding out the restaurant had run out of the fish." Then she straightened the flowers Renata had brought, told me the house would be busy this weekend with the committee's summer event, and left a gift bag containing a silver frame, empty, for the christening portrait. An empty frame. Sit with the empty frame. It's the most honest thing she ever gave me. That night, Renata folded herself into the vinyl recliner, and in the dark, apropos of nothing, she said, "When they discharge you, you'll go back to that house. If anything happens, anything, you call me before you argue with anyone. Promise me that." I laughed. She didn't. "Promise me, Nora?" I promised. I didn't ask why. She'd have told me, and I wasn't ready. I think she knew both things. They kept us overnight. One night, routine, me learning to nurse at 3 a.m. in that particular hospital. Silence that feels like the inside of a held breath. Daniel visited once for an hour, distracted, taking calls in the hallway. Through the door, I caught fragments in his low store manager voice. Numbers, dates, we just need until fall. Tell them we're good for it. When he came back in, I asked flat out, no wifely diplomacy. "Daniel, is something wrong with money?" My husband looked at his wife in a hospital gown holding his day-old daughter and performed his mother's smile. Nothing you need to worry about. You just rest. I want to flag that sentence for every woman listening. Nothing you need to worry about is not reassurance. It's a door closing softly with you on the outside of your own life. I didn't push. I had a jaundiced newborn and stitches. You ration what you're able to know. Discharge came on a bright Thursday morning. Daniel was supposed to drive us home at 10. At 9:40, he texted, "Store crisis, can't leave, so sorry, take a cab, I'll see you at home and we'll celebrate." My mother was at work. I told her not to leave early. We were fine. It's a 10-minute cab. I strapped my daughter's carrier into a taxi that smelled like pine trees, and I actually said to the driver, "God forgive me, proud of it, Ashford Lane, the big one with the stone gate." 3 years of tuition into that family, and I still flashed the name like a keycard. The cab pulled away and left us on the curb, and I stood there a second, adjusting the carrier, looking up at the house. All the windows were closed. On the porch, in the shade, sat 2 suitcases. You know a suitcase's silhouette the way you know your own handwriting. Those were mine. The navy set, a wedding gift from a cousin. On top of the nearest one, my winter coat, folded in a neat square. In June, somebody had packed for a season I wouldn't be there for. I stood on the walk, doing the thing where your brain offers you better explanations at a discount. We're being moved to the carriage house. The suitcases are the first load. I carried my daughter up the steps of that porch on legs I couldn't feel, and I tried my key in the big oak door, and it went in half a knuckle and stopped. New lock. The brass plate still bright from the locksmith's screwdriver. I rang the bell of the house I had lived in for 3 years, holding a baby born into its name the day before, standing next to my own packed luggage. Footsteps. The door opened 4 inches and stopped on the chain. The chain for me. And in the gap, Vivian, pearls on at 10 in the morning, face arranged like a form letter. Nora, not dear. My name served cold. Behind her, deeper in the hall, I heard a floorboard, and then nothing. A presence choosing to stay a presence. I said something brilliant, like, "Vivian, my key." And she looked at me through that 4-inch gap, the way you look at a solicitor with a clipboard, and said the sentences she had clearly drafted, redrafted, and approved in committee. Daniel needs a clean start, and this household needs contributors. You've been a lovely guest, but guests don't stay forever. A guest. 3 years, $41,000, and 1 grandchild, and I had made guest. "Vivian," I said, because the human brain is loyal to its last working map. "I live here. We'll sort this out when Daniel gets home. He's at the store." And Vivian Merrick tilted her head and gave me one small, patient, curatorial smile through the gap in her own front door and retired my map of the world in one move. "Who do you think packed the suitcases, dear?" Dear was back for that one. Had to be. And then, while I stood there relearning gravity, she delivered the line the whole town would eventually hear about, in the calm budget committee voice of a woman reading a line item she'd already decided to cut. "Every person under this roof earns their place. You had a difficult year, and we're all sympathetic, but sympathy is not a line of credit. There is no room in this house for a useless wife." The door closed, not slammed, closed with a click. Which is worse? Slamming is at least a conversation. I stood on the porch of the finest house in Cedar Hollow, holding a day-old baby next to a winter coat, folded for a winter I'd apparently be spending elsewhere, and above me, I heard it, the soft complaint of an old window frame. 2nd floor, east wing, our bedroom. I stepped back off the porch into the sun and looked up, and there was Daniel, my husband, Ren's father, store crisis and all, standing behind the glass with his arms crossed, close enough to have heard everything through a window he did not open. We looked at each other for 3 full seconds. Then he looked away first and did nothing. In the house his grandfather built, while his wife and daughter stood on the sidewalk with the luggage, so I kept my promise. I didn't knock again. I didn't argue with anyone. I sat down on the bigger suitcase, got out my phone, and called my mother. Mom, it happened. The thing you made me promise about. 4 seconds of silence on the line, and then my mother's voice, so level, it scared me more than Hamzand shouting would have. Are you and the baby safe? Are you sitting down? 20 minutes. Click. No. Questions about what or why or how could they? As if she'd been waiting by the phone for 3 years with her coat on. I sat on that suitcase in the June sun and held my sleeping daughter and did inventory, because inventory is what I have instead of screaming. Curtains twitched across the street, one neighbor, then the corner house. Cedar Hollow was taking notes. One day postpartum, I was sweating through a going home outfit I'd packed weeks ago in a different life. My stitches ached when I shifted, and a purple-gray thought kept surfacing with remarkable calm, the way true things do. I paid to stand on this sidewalk, $35,000 into the envelope, $41,000 into the envelope. Brick building I could see the slate roof of, just past the garden, full of another woman's gala banners. I had bought and paid for my own eviction and tipped on the way out. And here's the strange mercy of hitting the exact bottom of something. The shame, which had been idling in me for 3 years, quietly changed its address. It stopped being mine. It walked up those porch steps and moved in with the people behind the chain lock. I was still doing that math when the gray sedan came around the corner, my mother's sensible, paid-off Camry, driving 5 miles an hour faster than my mother has ever driven, pulling to the curb in front of me. Both front doors opened. Out of the driver's side came Renata Callahan in her work blazer, and out of the passenger side, carrying a leather briefcase, came a silver-haired man I'd never seen before in my life. Baby first, my mother said, and held Ren for 10 full seconds with her eyes closed, like drinking water after a long shift. Then she handed my daughter back, nodded at the silver-haired man, and said, Nora, this is Marcus Reyes. He's been my attorney for 11 years. Get in the car, both of you. I don't do business on other people's sidewalks. We didn't drive far. Around the corner, under the big elm on Conquest Street, engine off, and there, in a parked Camry, with my newborn asleep in my arms, my mother opened the folder she'd been carrying, laid the first page on the center console, and turned my understanding of Cedar Hollow upside down like an hourglass. The letterhead said Groundwork Notes, LLC. I heard my own voice say, Bedrock Servicing, $960 a month, memo line blank, auto pay, years of it. My mother looked at me, sideways, almost apologetic. The servicing company collects it, but the note behind it, the note is, mine, reader. I do this for a living, so I didn't need the lawyer's translation, but I'll give you mine. The Merrick house, the stone gate, the oak door, the chain lock, all of it carried a private mortgage. Not from a bank. Banks had said no years ago. From a private lender, through a broker, and private notes get bought and sold like used pianos. 4 years ago, the note secured by the finest address in Baku, Cedar Hollow, had been quietly purchased by a one-woman LLC registered to half a duplex on Drabins, Larkspur Street. Mom, I said, you hold their house. My mother corrected me the way she'd correct a rookie at the escrow desk. I hold the debt sitting on their house. Different thing, a beat. Marcus, from the back then seat, dry as an audit. As of 90 days ago, Mrs. Merrick's family is $12,400 behind, which makes today less different than usual. Let me give you my mother's story the way she gave it to me, parked under that elm, in the unhurried, voice of a woman who has waited 4 years to be asked. 30 years at the escrow desk means 30 years of watching this town's paper. She'd seen the Merrick file cross her counter more than once. A refinance in the 90s, another after the big box stores opened by the highway, each one a little more creative than the last. Names age like roofs, honey, she said. From the street, you can't tell. From the paperwork, you can. 4 years ago, the spring I got engaged into that address, a broker's flyer crossed her desk. Private note for sale, performing, well secured, local. She recognized the address before she finished the first line. And Renata Callahan, who has never bought a lottery ticket in her life, cashed out a retirement CD and bought the mortgage on the Merrick family home. I asked the obvious, why? She was quiet a second, hands at 10 and 2 on a parked steering wheel. Because my daughter was going to be living under that roof, and I'd rid what was holding the roof up. You buy the field between your house and a wildfire, Nora. That's all this ever was. She never told me because, and here she looked at me with the only apology her face makes. If you'd known, you couldn't have lived there honest. And if they'd known, you'd have paid for it in 100 small ways. So the LLC stayed quiet. And when they ran 90 days behind last spring, I told the servicer to be patient. A pause. 10 and 2. I was patient because my daughter and my grandchild slept in that house. This morning, your mother-in-law solved that problem for me. She turned the key. Buckle up. We're going home to feed the baby. Then you're going to tell me what you want. That night at my mother's duplex, in my old room, a crib assembled by Marcus Reyes, of all people, in a dress shirt and reading glasses, I nursed Ren at 2 a.m. and stared at the folder on the dresser. I'm going to be honest with you about the tide that came through me, because this channel doesn't sell saints. I thought about foreclosure. I let myself walk all the way through it, the notice in the paper, the committee reading it, an auction sign zip-tied to the stone gate, Vivian carrying her own suitcases down those porch steps while curtains twitched. I tasted it. It tasted the way sugar tastes when you're sick, right? Then wrong. Because at the end of that daydream, every time, was Ren, 5 years old, asking why the other grandma lived nowhere, and me handing her a war for an inheritance. So I did what I do. I took the pencil off my mother's nightstand. She keeps one there, of course she does, and in the back of the baby's feeding log, I wrote 3 lines like a bookkeeper closing a hard year. Option 1, burn it down. Option 2, use the note to force the door back open, make them take me in, the wife with the leverage. Option 3, collect what is mine to the dollar and close the account. I looked at option 2 the longest. I'll admit it, the old hunger has a long tail, living in that castle, knowing they had to be polite to me. And then I heard it in Vivian's voice, earns her keep, and realized option 2 was just the same house with the collar on the other neck. My phone lit up. Daniel, Mom went too far today. Give it a few weeks to cool down and I'll bring you home. We'll talk. A few weeks, from the man watching from a window. I put the phone face down and drew a circle around option 3. In the morning, my mother made eggs, set 2 plates, sat across from me the way she used to before school, and asked her question with the salt still in her hand. I can call that loan tomorrow, Nora. Accelerate, foreclose, the whole parade. Marcus says we'd win ugly, but win. Or I can shred the file and sell the note back to some pension fund and let gravity handle the Merrick family, because gravity always does. It's not my sidewalk they stood you on. She set the salt down. So it's not my call. What do you want? And I heard the question underneath, the one she'd been asking my whole life in snow, tires, and labeled coolers. Who do you want to be about this? I looked at Ren in the bassinet, 2 days old, running a fever of exactly nothing, owing nothing, signed up for nothing, and I answered as the thing I am. which turns out not to be a Merrick or a victim, but a bookkeeper. I want to close the account, correct, to the dollar, and done. Here's what that meant. 1. An acceleration notice, real and legal, because the Merricks don't answer doors unless the knock is heavier than they are. 2. My civil claim rides with it, $41,000 for the carriage house, documented, plus my belongings and a quiet, uncontested separation. 3. The trade. If they make me whole, my mother restructures the arrears and sells the note to a boring institutional servicer. Nobody loses the house over my broken heart. If they fight, option 1 comes off the shelf by itself. Marcus reached the Merrick's longtime attorney by Monday. Surely this is a misunderstanding, the man started. Marcus read him 2 numbers, the arrears and the recorded instrument number, and the line went quiet. A meeting was set for Thursday. I overruled one thing, not the attorney's office, the porch. Every hard conversation in that family had happened on their terrain. The one time the terms were mine, I wanted the front door. 10 a.m., Thursday, I said. We used the front door. Thursday, I wore my audit blazer. We drove to Ashford Lane, and I knocked 3 times on that oak door myself. Vivian opened it in full regalia, got as far as Nora, this is not, before Marcus held out an envelope. Counsel for Groundwork Notes, LLC, holder of the note on this property. You'll want to read this first. I watched her posture break from the top down. Eyebrows, mouth, shoulders, a hand finding the doorframe. This is some trick, she said, voice suddenly free of any committee. My mother answered in one sentence. The servicer collects it, Vivian. I own it. Doorway, or your table. For the first time, that door opened all the way for a Callahan. At the cherrywood table, Douglas arrived already gray. The words weren't new to him, only the name behind them was. Marcus laid out the note, the payment history, the $12,400 in arrears. Vivian did the math out loud, backward through every red circle in her ledger, then called for Daniel, who came down the same stairs he'd once watched me from. She rallied once. This family built half this town before my mother put it down flat. We don't buy names, Vivian. We buy ground, and the ground under your name has been in my handbag for 4 years. Then something I didn't expect. Vivian sat, all at once, looking 60-something and tired. I came into this family with 1 suitcase, she said, to no one. I ate at the children's table for 10 years before anyone let me hold a serving spoon. Everyone who enters this house pays. She heard her own logic out loud and stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes found mine. For 2 honest seconds, we understood each other completely. She had been me. She'd just decided the fee was fair because she'd already paid it. I didn't gloat. I slid my 1 page across, the terms. Then I walked to the porch and set the brass carriage house key on the railing. I'm returning the only thing of yours I ever wanted, I said. Nora, Daniel, you know where my mother's door is. You've never once used it. I walked down those same 6 steps, the same June light, except this time I was leaving on my own legs. My mother started the car, checked both ways, and said, You gave the key back. I did. Good. That was the whole debrief, because we both knew what I'd really left on that railing, not brass, but the idea that a table with my name on it existed behind that gate, if I just earned it. I declined to renew. That night I grieved quietly, not for Vivian, not even mostly for Daniel, but for the dream itself, the carved roast, the 3-generation photo, the whole stage set I'd been chasing since I was 8. Daniel called at 9 and left a voicemail asking for a few weeks. His whole vocabulary of love was a request for extensions. I filled out the divorce papers at my mother's kitchen table. My hand shook on the first line, not from doubt from downgrade. By the last page, it was steady. Then I closed the ledger in my nightstand with a double line, account closed, nothing carried forward. Here's how it settled. The Merricks paid the $40,000 within 6 months. The boat first, then Douglas's Roadster. My boxes came back packed with real care. Say what you want, Vivian can pack. The divorce was uncontested. I got sole custody. Daniel gets his Saturdays with Wren. Gentle as always. Gentle was never the missing ingredient. My mother sold the note at a modest profit to an out-of-state servicer, where the Merrick name is now just another 7 digits in a portfolio. I bought it as a firewall, she said. Never wanted a throne. The following spring, a for sale sign went up outside the stone gate. The finest house in Cedar Hollow, sold to a nice orthodontist's family with a trampoline. The Merricks moved to a townhouse near the club. Nobody foreclosed. A borrowed name just came due on its own, and I stopped making the payments for it. Callahan Bookkeeping reopened that fall. My old clients came back and brought friends, and a quiet side practice grew. Young women bringing me the paperwork their new families had slid across beautiful tables. I read every page with them, free of charge. Call it a tithe to the escrow desk. Wren turned 1 that June. My mother took a slightly crooked photo of the 3 of us on the duplex porch, the only 3-generation portrait I've ever been in. It hangs in my office now. My key ring carries exactly 2 keys, the office and a small rented house 4 doors from my mother's. Nobody holds a key to my life for show anymore. It took me 33 years to learn what my mother tried to hand me at 13 over meatloaf. A family that makes you pay your way in was never selling family. It was selling a seat, and the rent never stops rising. The people who are actually yours pull the chair out for free, because love that keeps books isn't love, it's a mortgage, and someone always calls the note eventually. That's my story. 2 suitcases, 1 silver sedan, and a brass key I finally gave back. If you're paying rent on a seat at somebody's table, the person who shows up in 20 minutes is your family. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.